Today marks the first federal holiday signed into law since Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 1983. Most federal workers are off today in recognition of Juneteenth tomorrow. The holiday has been celebrated by African Americans since the Civil War era, commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. But the U.S. has now officially declared it a holiday for all Americans. Ahead of Juneteenth, our Michael Strahan talked to former President Barack Obama about the holiday and race relations in this country as part of ABC's Juneteenth special. Take a look.
President Obama, happy Juneteenth.
It is good to see you. Happy Juneteenth to you.
Thank you. I remember being in school, and they had all the presidents, and they had every president up there. You would look at that list, and you would say, I want to be president, but I don't think you could believe it. Right. Now, when they look at that, your face is up there.
Right.
And a lot of people will look and say, it signifies, since you've been elected president, that we've moved on from the issue of race. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's never been the case, that by virtue of my election, somehow we entered into a post-racial world. It wasn't something I believed at the time, and I certainly don't believe it now. So the fact is that a lot of barriers still exist for a whole lot of folks.
Yeah.
When you look at that list of presidents, we still haven't seen a woman. And the notion that women somehow are not qualified to, the fact is, at least in my household, the women are smarter, more insightful, more caring, better looking, more talented, funnier.
We live in the same household.
That's my point. So something's happening in our society that prevents them from ascending to the highest office in the land. The same is true for African Americans. The same is true for Latinos and the first Americans, the Native Americans. The odds are stacked in ways that prevent a lot of young people from realizing their potential, and we can do something about it.
In the Promised Land, you talk about hope. The country is built on hope. Pioneers, abolitionists, civil rights workers.
Right.
You ran on hope.
Yeah.
We are choosing hope over fear and sending a powerful message that change is coming to America.
We're now in 2021, and we have the pandemic, the insurrection, racial reckoning. A lot of people feel like they've lost hope. How can people get that hope back?
You get hope back from, for me at least, taking the long view and recognizing that resilience, determination, the ability to deal with setbacks and disappointments and keep going, that those are qualities that can carry us forward. And no one has exhibited that more historically in this country than African Americans. The March on Washington happened during my lifetime. That's not ancient history. In big parts of the country, segregation was still operative when I was alive. What seems like stuff we now take for granted, that's just a generation old.
There's so many people out there who idea the American dream, they can't visualize, they can't see it anymore. So what is it going to take for people to be able to realize and envision the American dream again?
Well, look, historically, the American dream has been a reality for some and a myth for others. We're in a community, Anacostia, in Washington, D.C., that's representative of a lot of communities around the country where the kids who grow up here may formally be free, but structurally, because of poverty, because of schools that aren't working, because of substandard housing, it requires so much more effort for them to live out that American dream. And so our job is to make sure that it's not a myth. And right now, for too many, it still is.
I'm Michael Strahan in Washington, D.C.
All right, thanks to Michael for that interview. And let's go to LA Times columnist and ABC News contributor Elsie Granderson for a little bit more on this. Elsie, happy Juneteenth to you, first of all.
Thank you. Happy Juneteenth to you as well. Remember, this is a federal holiday for everyone.
For all Americans now, we're all celebrating Juneteenth today, tomorrow, the whole weekend, right? Elsie, I wanted to ask you, President Biden signed Juneteenth into law yesterday during a large ceremony. The vice president was there by his side. Other lawmakers were there as well. But he also had Opal Lee by his side. How big was that moment?
That was tremendous because a lot of Americans do not know or did not know who she was or what she did or how committed she was to this cause. So it was a nice gesture to be able to acknowledge that this was not necessarily something that was done solely by elected officials, that like many incredible social justice movements in this country's history, that it started from the ground up. And that grassroots leaders like Ms. Opal Lee were necessary in order to get Washington, D.C. to acknowledge the will of the people.
Now, Juneteenth is the first federal holiday signed into law since Martin Luther King Jr. Day 40 years ago. Why do you think it took so long for this to happen and for so many in this country to even learn what Juneteenth is?
White supremacy. I mean, there's no other way to sort of, make this sound better than what it is. It's not as if Juneteenth wasn't known. Certainly in the Black community, we celebrated it. Certainly in the state of Texas, they knew the history. So the question is, why was it kept out of our history books? Who would have benefited from this information not being shared? I would suggest the same sort of worldview that benefited from all of the race riots that happened, all across this country. We know about Tulsa and Wilmington, but so many other cities also experienced these horrific race riots. They were all kept out of the history books. Who benefits from that? So when you ask, why didn't so many people know about Juneteenth, I would simply say it's the same reasons why you see today people are trying to mischaracterize January 6th as just a normal tourist visit.
So what was it like growing up celebrating this holiday, knowing so many people didn't even know what it was? And how do you hope that changes going forward?
Well, a couple of things. I remember Juneteenth growing up in Detroit. We used to have celebrations in church. We had celebrations in downtown. There were lessons taught in my classroom. I was really fortunate to have been in an advanced school, which made sure that those gaps that other schools didn't have were filled in my school. So I recognize my privilege in that, and I'm grateful for it. But also I hope what it does is continue a dialogue about our history, and not just a surface dialogue. Case in point, yay, we have Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Now let's talk about what happened before that. That's important because it's not as if slave owners or former slave owners weren't already receiving compensation or reparations for the loss of slaves before Juneteenth. They were getting compensation for the slaves they lost while people in Texas were still enslaved. Why do you think that is? What impact did it have on the lives and the policies? These are now the discussions we need to have because there are elements of those pieces of legislation that are still prevalent today because they inform their predecessors, and those predecessors kept building on those predecessors. And eventually what you have is a system that is fully ingratiated in sort of like this colorist society that we're trying to gloss over by singing "We Shall Overcome" in a room and signing a piece of paper. That is a nice gesture, but we still need to do the work.
So, Elsie, what's appropriate in terms of how to celebrate Juneteenth, and how are you celebrating this year?
Well, first of all, I was actually just Googling because I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona right now. And so I was Googling to see what was happening in my immediate area. Scottsdale is a former sundown town. And for those of you who don't know, sundown towns were places in America where African Americans and other people of color needed to have been cleared out of before the sun went down. Otherwise, the cops could arrest us, the KKK could kill us, etc. So Scottsdale is a sundown town, a former sundown town. So I'm curious to see what they're doing here to acknowledge it. But if I'm not satisfied, trust, I will zip right on over to LA and find myself a party where my people are celebrating this, because this is a tremendous moment. I don't want to downplay it. It's a tremendous moment. It just isn't the final moment.
All right. Well, Elsie, I'm sure you're going to find a great celebration one way or the other. We appreciate you coming on. And again, a happy Juneteenth to you.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.